Hello, Looney listeners. You are listening to episode 29 of Into the Night, a Moon Knight podcast. I will be your host for tonight, Ray, and this episode will be looking at two issues, a classic run, Hulk Magazine Volume 1, Number 11, Graven Image of Death, as well as a modern run, which is a continuation of Charlie Huston's Moon Knight Volume 5, Issue 2. Alongside that, we'll have news as always, so please grab your issues out, sit back, relax, and get your conchu on. Yes, welcome back, Loonies. I am going Han Solo tonight. Just myself, Ray, doing this episode of Into the Night. Glad to have you with me. It's a bit of a weird one, I guess. I'm going this episode by myself. Connor's unavailable, unfortunately. So he'll be back next issue or next episode. But in the meantime, 29. This episode, we'll be looking at the classic issues of Moon Knight in the Hulk magazine, as well as the continuation of Charlie Huston's Volume 5 of Moon Knight, issue number 2. We also are very fortunate to have another guest narrator with us. This time round, it is Sean from Only the Valiant, the Valiant comic radio podcast. They are a fantastic podcast. If you like comics and if you read Valiant comics, these guys are right on top of their game. They they review all the issues every week, and they come out every week on the week as well, reviewing all the current issues of Valiant. So really, really exciting to have Sean guest narrate the two issues up for grabs this episode. So I guess before we start going into the reviews, I guess just news-wise, again, there were just like a handful of news articles this week. If we start from the first one I saw was that DC Comics artist David Finch, who aptly draws the Huston comics, which we're reviewing just recently in our modern run. He'll be appearing at MCM Birmingham's Comic Con. So he's definitely a guy to catch up and see if you're around that area and if you do the Comic Con scene. Unfortunately, myself being in Australia, have next to no chance to actually going there, but if you're around there and you are a Looney or a Moon Knight fan, please try and check him out. He'll be there, I think that is in mid to late March, so definitely something to check out. The second bit of news that we have that's Mooney related, again, it's more past Moon Knight alumni. There's an article here on Jeff Lemire and basically his new series coming out on Image called Gideon Falls. So there's been a bit of a swell about this new series coming out through Image, and anyone who has read any of Jeff Lemire's stories will know that he is hot property at the moment. So he spoke to another writer who is also a journalist, Pichetshote. I'm really terrible with names, but they basically have a dialogue in that article, and they talk about both of their series. So Jeff Lemire's is on Gideon Falls, and Pichetshote is on Infidel. So it's a really interesting article as well. Lemire touches a little bit on his Moon Knight run, basically how satisfied he was with it and how happy he was with the final product, and how that kind of informed him in pursuing and writing Gideon Falls. He also mentions in the article as well, like the origin of Gideon Falls, which is kind of interesting. He was in film school, I believe, in the early 90s, and he actually made a short film, and one of his friends played, I think, Norton, who's the lead character in Gideon Falls. Anyway, the idea of the story has been kind of bubbling for a while, and I guess he's drawn upon the story and characters which are, around about 20 years old, to bring us his new series. It looks pretty cool. It's a horror book predominantly, and Lemire mentions he's not per se a horror fan, but he's found it very enjoyable to work with Sorrentino again. And for comic fans out there, you'd know that Jeff Lemire and Sorrentino have collaborated previously before in the big two publishers. I guess the first was at DC with Green Arrow, and later on with Old Man Logan. And actually, this was also one of the impeti? One of the reasons why Lemire wanted to get into this story. He wanted to work with Sorrentino again, so it seems they have a very good relationship, both writer and artist, and it's something definitely worth checking out, Loonies. So I might dip my toe in this as well. I believe Connor has read a preview issue, the first issue, and from what I hear, it's pretty good. So definitely worth checking out if you can. Finally, for news, we also have one of these articles came out again, and it was through Screen Rant. And basically, if I can just open that up now, it's one of those ones which have like 10 heroes coming soon to the MCU, and 10 that fans will have to wait for. So, again, this kind of speculates on characters coming up, and characters that we want to see. And a quick rundown of it. Look, it varies. It's got so from number 20, it's got Captain Marvel, which is coming soon. It's got Ghost Rider, which they reckon they'll have to wait. Like we've seen Ghost Rider before in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as Robbie Reyes, and there's speculation about Johnny Blaze coming back onto the big screen under the Marvel umbrella, which is pretty cool. Again, Cloak and Dagger, it says coming soon, so we all know that's finished production, and that will be released the 7th of June this year, so that's obviously a definite. Bear with me here, Loonies. I'm going somewhere with this article. Then we have next up Fantastic Four, which it says we have to wait. So again, that's more like speculation. For those of you in the know, Marvel have reacquired the licenses for Fantastic Four and the X-Men, but Feige himself mentioned that they've got no immediate plans for both the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. So I guess it might be something they're holding on to and waiting for, phase 4, phase 5, down the track, once the Avengers kind of, come to a sensible conclusion. So anyway, they're on the cards. We have Adam Warlock, and that's, noted as coming soon as well. Again, for Marvel or comic fans out there, they would know that in the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, the sequel, there was made mention of Adam Warlock as well. So we know he's coming. So this is pretty much not an if, it's kind of like a when. Then we have Blade as another on the list, and that is listed as have to wait. So I reckon they're thinking, well, he may or may not come on screen. It will be nice to see, I don't know, maybe Wesley Snipes or someone else take over the Blade mantle, but it will be nice to see Blade back under the MCU. It's got also Miles Morales as coming soon. So we know that Miles Morales will be featuring in an animated movie. It's called Into the Spider-Verse, and it's coming out late 2018. So this is pretty much a given, and we are to expect Miles Morales on screen in animated form. he's kind of indirectly alluded to in Spider-Man Homecoming as well, through Donald Glover, who I believe was the uncle, I think, or he had some connection to Miles Morales. So we know Miles is in that universe somewhere. So anyway, he has been listed as coming soon. So bear with me, loonies. I'm still getting somewhere. Next we have Silver Surfer, and noted down as have to wait. So similar to Fantastic Four, I believe the property has come over to the MCU again, but like the Fantastic Four, I guess they're just biding their time to use the Silver Surfer in a significant way, I guess, as well, rather than just dropping him in. He is a rather big character in the Marvel Universe, so they'd have to kind of get him right, I guess. We also have here Mr. Immortal actually makes the list, and he's listed as coming soon because we all know that there is, or there's going to be, a New Warriors TV show. So I'm not too sure where it's kind of at the moment with New Warriors. I know it's been mentioned that they'd have a show. They've cast them. I believe there might be a bit of delays here and there. Actually, in this article though, it does say it's coming out this summer. So it might well be in production now. I'll have to double check on that, loonies. I'm not too sure. But anyway, it is listed as coming soon. That's again a when, not an if. Then we have the X-Men, have to wait. So similar to Fantastic Four. It's got the same, I guess, it was reacquired again, but no immediate plans. Squirrel Girl comes in next, coming soon. Again, she's part of the New Warriors, so she'll be in the TV show. It'll be great to see her. Coming in at number 9, Beta Ray Bill, have to wait. So although there was a golden statue of Beta Ray Bill apparently in Thor Ragnarok, I actually missed that. So he's floating around in the universe somewhere. I guess there is no immediate plans for Beta Ray Bill to feature. Apparently, Feige has also confirmed that there was a longer sequence that kind of alluded more to Beta Ray Bill that was cut from Thor Ragnarok. So he's definitely been on the cards, but as to whether or not he will, feature more prominently, it's kind of up to speculation. There's also, it goes on to the new Guardians of the Galaxy, so coming soon. So again, we do know that James Gunn has said that he will take on Volume 3, and it will apparently set up the next decade of Marvel movies. So it's a pretty big call, and it's a pretty significant thing that is coming soon. Quasar, have to wait, which is a bit of a shame because I really do like Quasar. Just my opinion. It'll be really cool to see him in action, especially since they're expanding on the cosmic universe. But he's definitely on the cards. He's linked to the Guardians of the Galaxy, and he's been teased by James Gunn in name only. So he could well turn up, but there's no confirmation of it. Now, in this article, number 6, this is what I was coming to, and this is what I thought was quite interesting, loonies. Number 6 is Moon Knight, and he's not listed as have to wait. He's listed as coming soon. So, unlike Blade or Ghost Rider, this is apparently, well, it's kind of alluding to that it's not speculation, that he is coming soon, similar to Guardians of the Galaxy 3, similar to Squirrel Girl, similar to Mr. Immortal. So all the previous ones that I've mentioned, which are a when, not an if, the Moon Knight seems to be listed as he will definitely feature. And it says here in the article, Netflix was rumored to be thinking about a series. And apparently a movie has been kicking around the Marvel Studios, but there have been no plans that have finalised it yet. So, I don't know, take it with a grain of salt, loonies, but it does mention here that Moon Knight is really, really knocking at the door to enter the MCU or to enter the small screen. So this is what really kind of piqued my interest. And which is, I guess, relevant to this podcast. And then we have the final 5 here, Young Avengers, which is mentioned as having to wait. So that would include the likes of Wiccan, Hulkling, I guess Kate Bishop, she'll be awesome, and America Chavez. Then it has also the Wasps coming soon. So it mentions that there might be something beyond Ant-Man and the Wasp, and potentially something to do with Hope Van Dyne and Janet Van Dyne. So depending on what happens in the movie, which is released July 6th of this year with Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly, there might potentially be something, might be a Wasps movie. The final 3, we have Man-Thing as I Have to Wait, which I can see is probably not really relevant. Needs a bit more of a mystical angle to the Marvel Universe, or to the MCU, which Doctor Strange has introduced. So we might see the Man-Thing, but at the moment it's just kind of pure speculation. Again, number 2, we have Shuri as coming soon. So I actually, just less than an hour ago, I came out of the cinemas and I watched Black Panther, which I'm sure a lot of the loonies will be doing as well. It was a great movie. No spoilers. There are podcasts out there that will review it, so I won't speak too much of it. Other than Shuri was in it, and she was fantastic in it. And for comic fans, you probably know that she takes on the mantle of Black Panther as well. So I think it's very much a possibility that we could see Shuri in Black Panther sequels, potentially taking up the mantle of Black Panther. At the moment, the success of Black Panther in the box office, I guess it's most assuredly getting a sequel, if not a part 3 as well, to make it a trilogy. A highly successful film, and it will be great to see Shuri as the Black Panther. She has done very well in the role. And number 1, as I Have to Wait, so it's just purely a rumour, would be Spider-Gwen. It's got here, and I think should be pretty cool. I think should be a pretty interesting character to fit in. Spider-Man's always been popular, I think, in the box office, and this will be a good opportunity for another strong female lead to take on a big Marvel tentpole film. So, nothing really planned for that, but that would be great. I mean, I'd like to see She-Hulk. We've mentioned this before as well. She-Hulk would have been really cool. I'd take Spider-Gwen as well. I'd watch that definitely. So this article, it did have as number 6 Moon Knight, and I just wanted to point out there coming soon. So does that mean that we are definitely going to get a Moon Knight on screen or not? I guess we'll have to wait and see. There are a lot of factors that will play into this, as we've mentioned before as well. Marvel establishing their own streaming service, which could work in the favour. Netflix not taking on board any more Marvel characters apparently, so that's kind of shut that option off. There are a lot of things that could actually go for and against Moon Knight coming on screen, but we'll just have to see. Right, loonies. So I think, without further ado, we might try and go over the moon. Yes, so we are going to go over the moon this episode. And as mentioned, there was a slight change of plan. We did say last episode that Chris from Defenders TV podcast will be joining us. He's a big Spider-Man fan, and it would have been I think it would have been quite suitable to have him come on to talk about Moon Knight's appearance in Spectacular Spider-Man, which he does feature in issues 22 and 23. So we've had that lined up, and those are technically the next appearances in the classic chronology of Moon Knight throughout comics. But unfortunately, Chris has been a bit crook. So first and foremost, Chris, I hope you're feeling better, and are looking forward to speaking with you next episode. So for this episode, we'll put the Spider-Man issues on hold. And look, we'll just jump to the next classic run, which is, funnily enough, in a Hulk magazine. So, The Incredible Hulk, I guess with the success of the TV show, Marvel tried to, I guess, promote it even more by releasing a magazine rather than a comic book of The Incredible Hulk, in the hope that, I guess, it would garner more exposure to people and potentially more sales. Now, with the Hulk magazine, being a rather, I think it was like 50, 60 pages long, there was an opportunity to have a backup story. And so the Hulk magazine obviously featured the Hulk predominantly, but there was an option for Marvel to, I guess, expose fans of the Hulk or fans of comic books to other characters. So along the lines, Moon Knight kind of came along, and they decided, okay, well, this might be a good chance, because Moon Knight is very much different from the Hulk. Like, he's a street level character, and it's a good opportunity to have a bit of a contrast. So with the magazine, after the main Hulk story, there's actually a Moon Knight story. And we're looking at, I think it spans across maybe 4 or 5 issues, but we're looking at issue 11, which has the part 1 of the Moon Knight story. I'm just pulling it up here now on my tablet. We're lucky enough also, again, as mentioned in the intro, we do have a very cool guest narrator. Now, I approached Sean from Only the Valiant to see if he wanted to do a guest narration for the show. I'm a big fan of Valiant Comics, and I'm a big fan of Only the Valiant. These guys have been going on for, well over 100 podcast episodes, and without fault, they come in, week out, with the reviews of the latest Valiant comics. So look, I threw a line out there, and I asked Sean, and actually, he's been so accommodating, I guess, because Sean recently he got engaged, and he got married around the New Year. So he had a lot on his plate to organise, and he had a podcast to look after as well. But he managed to find some time to actually not only do our guest narrations, but he actually tracked down the 2 issues that he's going to be narrating, and he had a good read. And I do believe he might be continuing with the Houston run, so hopefully we can hook him into the Mooney goodness. So anyway, we do have Sean. He will be narrating the first classic run for us, which is Hulk Volume 1, Issue 11, Graven Image of Death. And it was released October 1978 with writer Doug Mensch, artist Gene Colan, and inker Tony DeZuniga. So without further ado, I'll throw it to Sean for his bare bones.
What's up, Into the Night listeners? This is Sean from Only the Valiant, and I am going to tell you a tale. A tale of Moon Knight and treasures and danger. Of course, I'm providing the narration for Hulk Magazine number 11. This story is The Graven Image of Death. Moon Knight scours the streets of New York in search of a killer. 3 murders have occurred, and Moon Knight eyes a shady customer whom he believes to be behind at least some of them. Before he can glide down on his cape to apprehend the suspect, the man pulls a gun on a spectacled man walking out of an office and shoots him dead. Moon Knight can only watch as the man empties the victim's pockets and flees. Rather than chase him as Moon Knight, however, the Caped Avenger restrains himself and flees in the other direction, intent on catching the perpetrator with another plan. The killer finally stops running and decides to hail a cab to hasten his retreat. He gets in and is greeted with a rather chatty driver, who introduces himself as Jake Lockley. They arrive at the mansion of Joel Luxor, and just as the man is about to begrudgingly pay his fare, Lockley shocks him by calling him out as a murderer before the man can react. Lockley removes his attire to reveal Moon Knight underneath, and he launches himself at the criminal, finally pinning him to a tree with a crescent dart, which I call a moonerang. Moon Knight questions him, and it's discovered that the man was hired by Luxor, the owner of the mansion, to kill the poor victim in the street and retrieve a key which he had in his possession. Moon Knight grabs the key, ties up the criminal, and leaves him in the back of the cab as he goes to investigate. Luxor is seen with an associate playing pool when Moon Knight crashes their game. Busy with Luxor's associate, who it turns out is his bodyguard, Moon Knight cannot prevent Luxor being shot by a bullet from outside. It kills Luxor, but not before the sniper fires off another bullet into the wall nearby. Moon Knight quickly calls in Marlene to assist with the case. He asks Marlene to come to Luxor's mansion and search for anything suspicious before calling in the police to report the murder. Before leaving, Moon Knight etches out the bullet lodged in the wall and discovers that it's an old-fashioned bullet, most likely fired from a musket. With bullet and key in hand, Moon Knight races back outside, but is surprised to see his cab and the criminal in it gone. The Fist of Khonshu calls on Frenchie to fly in and pick him up and take him to the Fourth Estate, that being the Sun-Times newspaper office. Pretty nice to have a friend with a helicopter, just saying. So anyhow, Moon Knight arrives at the Sun-Times and pays a visit to one of his contacts there, Kurt. It so happens that the keys stolen and intended for Luxor belong to a storage unit at the newspaper's office. Kurt takes Moon Knight to the locker of Jim Polhouse, a features writer, and in it is a manuscript detailing a statuette of Horus and how Luxor intends to claim it. It goes on to say that the statuette is in the personal care of Fenton Crane, an assistant curator at the museum. Frenchie takes Moon Knight to the museum as Mooney suspects that the authentic statuette is in Crane's hand and a fake is being exhibited at the museum. His suspicions prove correct, and Moon Knight's sleuthing also discovers a missing musket. Ooh, musket, eh? From the wall. The same sort of gun that could have been fired upon Joel Luxor just moments ago. With suspicion mounting, Moon Knight once again asks Frenchie to take him to Crane's apartment in the hope to find more clues, or, better yet, Crane himself. When he gets there, Crane's apartment is empty. No sign of Crane or the statuette. Lastly, Moon Knight checks the closet, where out falls the unnamed criminal Moon Knight apprehended earlier, still bound and gagged. Turns out he wasn't contracted by Luxor, but another rival collector, Anton Varro. Luxor had contracted Crane to kill Polhouse in order to retrieve the key, but Crane was beaten to it by the unnamed criminal, now lying bound at the feet of Moon Knight. Convinced that Crane doesn't have the statuette, Moon Knight leaves the bound criminal to the police and heads for Luxor's mansion once again. It's the only place Crane would go if he's in search of the statuette. With Marlene there investigating on his behalf, however, Moon Knight fears for her safety. Just as he arrives, BAM! He hears a gunshot from inside the mansion. Marlene stands in terror with a gunshot to her arm and a crazed Fenton Crane, armed with a musket. He demands she tell him the whereabouts of the Horus statuette, or the next shot will be her death. And it leaves us with that 5 out of 5 cliffhanger Tamo ending.
Great, thank you, Sean. That was a cool, passionate reading of Moon Knight, issue 11 from the Hulk magazine, Graven Image of Death. It was certainly a very involved issue, let's just say that. And I guess after hearing that synopsis, we'll go into our 4 aspects. Again, for those who may be first-time listeners to this podcast, what Connor and I usually do is that we have a bare bones, which a guest narrator narrates for us, which was kindly Sean this instance. And then we name 4 main aspects. So these are, I guess, 4 main themes of the story, or more 4 main points of the issue that really kind of stood out. And I guess kind of encapsulated this issue. After that, there are a couple of notes, any smaller points, and then we usually end that with crescent dart ratings, so out of 5 crescent darts. Since it's just yours truly this episode, I've got the 4 main aspects here for this issue. Before I go into that, the main impressions of this issue. Look, I really enjoyed it. The art was very solid. Actually, I really enjoyed the art. It was quite, Gene Colan's art is really cool. It has a bit more realistic look to it, rather than a comic booky look. If you were to contrast it with the Charlie Huston and David Finch issue, which we'll do in the modern run, the artwork is a little bit more realistic. Fantastic detailing as well. And the story, I thought, was pretty good. Doug Moench has a good go at it. I enjoyed it. It was a little dense, which I'll get into in the 4 aspects. And it involved a little bit of toing and froing, I guess, just to get a hold of the characters, because Moench, I keep on saying Moench or Mensch. He's the same guy, but Doug Moench, he really does introduce a lot of characters here to get the plot going. But yeah, overall it was quite enjoyable. It was very much a thing of its time as well. But as an introduction to Moon Knight, it did a pretty good job. Compared to, we did a panel by panel last episode, which was essentially a reintroduction of Moon Knight by Charlie Huston. I still think Charlie Huston's introduction of Moon Knight was far better. It was a lot more succinct, and it kind of encapsulated everything of the character a lot more than, say, what this story does. But it still has its good points. Okay, so if I'm to go into our 4 main aspects for this story, the first one that I put was basically the significance of the statuette. So, one of the main themes, I guess, of this story is the location. Everyone's looking for this statuette of Horus. And in this issue so far, we don't know what the significance is, or what it will give to the person who has it. Is it just valuable for money, or does it have any supernatural elements to it? Would it give the holder of it any powers or anything like that? Or does it have something within it? Like, is it just a case for something that everyone's looking for? Just off the top of my head, is there a microchip or some valuable map or something inside? Anyway, this is the main object that is that everyone in the story is kind of after. And as we go through the story, we don't see it, but we see a lot of characters that are willing to kill for it as well. And this kind of wraps into my other main aspects as well. So look, I'll start talking about that as well, because it all kind of intertwines. So the significance of the statuette, there's a lot of people that are after it. And one of the other main aspects I had was basically Moench's storytelling. And I have here in my notes, I did say it was a little convoluted. because when I first read this issue, it was quite difficult, I thought, to follow. There were a lot of characters introduced, and there were a lot of, how shall I say, I guess, double takes. So the way I saw it was, okay, so if we were to distill this storyline in as simple as, view as possible, what we have are these characters. We have Joel Luxor, who is a wealthy person who wants these statuettes. We have Fenton Crane, who's a curator, who seems to have double-crossed Joel Luxor for it by swapping the authentic statuette with a fake one and taking the real one. We have Jim Polhouse, who is the reporter who seemingly knows about all this and has created a manifesto or a document which kind of reveals this secret, which is tied into the key that we saw at the very beginning. And then we also have Anton Varro and this unnamed assassin which Moon Knight comes across at the beginning as well. So this assassin that killed Jim Polhouse for the key, he was working for another, I think a wealthy person or another entrepreneur or artifact collector who wanted this statuette as well. Now, that's as simple as I can kind of describe it, but there's a lot of double takes. So what Monch does is that we originally think that this unnamed assassin is working for Joel Luxor because Moon Knight tracks him back to the Luxor mansion. But what we find out later that he wasn't there for Joel Luxor, and we find out that Joel Luxor gets shot by someone else and the unnamed assassin drives away. So we're left thinking, okay, is this Fenton Crane who has employed this unnamed assassin to somehow kill Joel Luxor? So it is. There's a level of confusion, I guess, to this story, which made it a little hard to follow. And I think Munch really introduced maybe one too many characters. I think it did make for an interesting kind of detective kind of story, and that's one of my other aspects as well. We see Moon Knight here definitely as a detective. He doesn't we are finding out alongside Moon Knight what is going on, and we know that the statue is needed. Joel Luxor is murdered for it, and we actually haven't even seen in statue. And Jim Polhouse is murdered for it as well, which is the key, which unlocks his locker, which had the manifesto, which Moon Knight later finds, as mentioned in the synopsis. So there is a bit of a tangled web here with the storytelling, and I did find that a little bit disconcerting when reading it. It's because these are secondary characters as well, so I was kind of constantly kind of going back and forth trying to find out who was who and what was their relationship to the next person. So anyway, so I found that a little bit of a foggy haze when it came to the story writing, but it was absolutely one of the main aspects of it. That's one of the things that I kind of went away from. I took away from this issue. The final aspect. So I had the statuette, I had Munch's storytelling, and Moon Knight as detective. The final aspect I would say would be Moon Knight's support crew. I mean, we do see. We also know Moon Knight is very much of a lone person, a lone wolf. But we see here a heavy dependency not only on Marlene, which he calls upon her to basically check out the Luxor mansion, has her as a not a spy, but I guess as they're trying to find some clues. So, so she's very much taking on a role that's kind of, beyond what her profession is. She's an archaeologist, but she's joining in Moon Knight in these escapades to try and solve this crime. So it's good to see that Marlene's involved in there. Unfortunately, she at the end she's caught out by Fenton Crane, and we're left with him pointing a musket at her and her being in some trouble. But she's featured in the story, as well as Frenchie. So we have the Mooncopter in its early iteration, very much not looking like a moon at all. If you remember our last episode, we talked about the moon jet, I guess it was, or the Mooncopter in Houston's run, which is very much in the shape of a moon. This is your kind of early standard nondescript. I don't know what it is. It looks like a futuristic helicopter, but it's aesthetically it's not really that that appealing. Anyway, we have Frenchie here, which Moon Knight relies on constantly throughout the issue to get him to and from places. So it had him going, picking him up from Luxor Mansion, and also dropping him off at the museum as well. So Frenchie's very much your I guess your sidekick at the moment, and he takes Moon Knight from place to place. So they're very much a team. So with Moon Knight, Frenchie, and Marlene, they're very much working all together, just with Moon Knight spearheading the operations. But look, we see Moon Knight again in his is still in his very classic costume. So he's got the cape connected to his wrists. He's all in white. His face is pure white as well. Still has his crescent darts and his truncheon. But yeah, he's looking very classic. And he still glides with his glider cape. So I guess if we were to look at crescent dart ratings, what would give this? I would give this one probably 3 crescent darts out of 5. It was solid enough for me. It definitely, it wasn't an outstanding issue as well. If anything, I did like the art. Some points were taken off, I guess, from Munch's story being a bit too heavy with a lot of characters and trying to, I don't know, overcomplicate things. But I guess when you do a mystery or detective story, you've got to wrap it in layers. So I understand what he was trying to do, but I found it a little confusing at times as well. So I gave it a 3. Also, I mean, the art was great. I think 3 was 3's a pretty decent score. Actually, I forgot to mention some notes as well. I only had a couple of notes here, and in, I think, stark contrast to last issue, it was funny, like not last issue, sorry, my fault, my bad. We did mention it in Bemis and Burroughs' latest run, where Moon Knight dons the mask and is only down to his boxers and his business shirt. In stark contrast to that, we have here your tropey Moon Knight is dressed as Jake Lockley, taking the unnamed assassin in the cab, and then Wooshka, he strips off his jacket and his pants all in one fell swoop, and he's in full Moon Knight costume. So I thought that was a sign of the times again, really. Realistically, how is that ever going to happen, unless he's got one of those fake trousers and shirts which you can just rip off with Velcro. I thought that was quite funny, particularly considering that we mentioned that before. The other note that I had as well, and I think this is a common thing with Moon Knight, and maybe more so with I guess runs around him and stories around him, maybe of this time as well. He seems to kind of always just miss out on saving people before they get killed. And I think that, Moon Knight is a grim character. Look, he doesn't kill, he doesn't seem to kill many people, and we'll talk about that later on in the Houston run, the next review. But he seems to just miss out. So if we look at the beginning, he's stalking, on the roofs of New York. He's trying to kind of crack this triple murder that's happened so far. And poor Jim Polhouse, we find out, it's too late. He gets shot in the stomach by someone, by the unnamed assassin. And Moon Knight is just too slow to get there and react. Second as well, when we go to Joel Luxor's mansion, again, okay, this was a bit hard for Moon Knight anyway. So Moon Knight crashes Luxor's mansion, and he kind of tries to interrogate Joel, and he's got a bodyguard there as well. So Moon Knight, battles with Luxor's bodyguard, but before he can do anything, Luxor's shot from a bullet, which comes from outside as well, and he's killed. Again, it's unfortunate that he's not able to do anything. I just thought that was quite interesting that, he's a superhero, and I guess you can be seeing that he kind of fails a couple of times. But he's trying his best, and I guess there's no way that he can actually, there's no way that he could stop that bullet from the window. But he certainly, I thought, could have tried to apprehend that gentleman at the beginning, if he looked a bit shady. But let's just say that he missed that. So, so he's got 2 dead bodies, not to his name, but would be on his conscience. So anyway, loonies. 3 Crescent Darts out of 5, I think, for that issue. Quite interesting. And we'll continue. I think the next, I think the Moon Knight in the Hulk magazines go up to issue 14. So we'll see the next part of what happens to Moon Knight in this early iteration of him in a future episode. Right now, though, I think I will throw it back to Sean so he can give us a bare bones for our modern run. Now, before Sean gets into this, I'll just give you the details. This is Moon Knight Volume 5, issue number 2. This is part 2 of 6 of The Bottom, and this part is called Fear More Than God. It was released July 2006, and it had writer Charlie Huston, artist David Finch, inker Danny Mickey, colours Frank Darmada, and letters by VC's Joe Caramagna, and editors Corey Settlemeyer and Axel Alonso. So, please, Sean, take it away.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Sean from OTV to bring you the narration of Moon Knight Issue 2, The Bottom. Fear More Than God. Alone in the dark, at the rundown estate of Grant Mansion, an old and tired Mark Spector reflects on his service to Khonshu and his life as a hero. Spector is scathing at himself and what he gave up in order to serve his god. It leads him to reflect upon his rivalry with Bushman and to recount the horrors which had led him to his current debilitated state. We flash back to the past and show Bushman and Moon Knight in the midst of a battle in what looks to be high above the city skyline of New York. They're on the rooftops, and each bloody blow is exchanged with another bloodier blow, with no one looking to be the clear victor. Spector reflects on this fateful battle with Bushman and concedes that their long, ongoing hatred for each other inevitably led to sloppiness on Moon Knight's behalf. What once were slick moves are now old tricks, and Bushman ultimately gains the upper hand and hurls the Fist of Khonshu off the roof edge. With sickening violence, Moon Knight hits his head on the metal fire stair balustrades on the way down, before destroying his legs and breaking both his knees as he crashes down below. He cries out to his god, "Khonshu!" before hitting the pavement with more wet snaps of broken bone and battered flesh. Spector's self-destructive reflection of the event leads him to blame not only himself, but ultimately Khonshu for leading him towards this destiny, a destiny which has left him a broken man. In the flashback, a half-dead Moon Knight lays crumpled in the alleyway as Bushman descends and unsheathes a machete to finish off his foe. A bloodied grin escapes his lips, but underneath the moonlight, the Avatar of Vengeance strikes out with one final flurry of hope and throws crescent dart after crescent dart at Bushman. By the fourth dart, which lodges itself in Bushman's throat, Bushman falters and collapses alongside Moon Knight. Amazingly, the battle still rages, and in an act of pure savagery, Bushman bites into Moon Knight's face with his sharpened teeth and tears away at mask and skin. Moon Knight fights back amidst the blood and wounds and finally gains leverage over Bushman and takes out another crescent dart and proceeds to cut the face off Bushman. Born from the hatred he has for Bushman, as well as a warning to all other criminals that he is someone to be feared, Moon Knight leaves Bushman for dead and thrusts his skinned trophy up toward the moon in an almost angry defiance to Khonshu. Spector recalls all of this as he sits alone on the floor at the feet of Khonshu's statue, with the pale moonlight drowning him in his self-pity. A knock on the door startles Spector out of his trance, and Samuels, his butler, introduces a guest for Spector. It's his old friend Crawley. Crawley wonders whether Spector's return to the mansion and the unveiling of the old statue of Khonshu heralds a return of Moon Knight, a hero that has gone missing years ago after the fateful encounter with Bushman. It appears this is not the first time Crawley has visited Mark Spector, and Mark is irritated at Crawley's incessant talk. He demands the drugs which he had requested from the aged acquaintance. Crawley can only sigh and comply to Mark's demands, and so he hands Mark the bag of painkillers, which he managed to procure via his own street connections. As Crawley leaves, he mentions to Mark that his old partner, Frenchie, has requested that Mark see him due to some unforeseen trouble. As Crawley leaves, he mentions to Mark his old partner Frenchie, and that Frenchie's requested that Mark see him due to some unforeseen trouble. Not having made contact with Frenchie for a long time, for it appears Mark has not been in contact with anyone he knows for a long time. Mark is left surprised at Crawley's last words, which are left lingering in the air. He calls Samuels and requests that he get the car, much to Samuels' delight. It would appear Mark has been a hermit for a while now, and so the thought of Mark going outside, even if just for lunch, puts a smile on Samuel's face. Mark pauses and contemplates whether he should take the painkillers which Crawley just handed to him. If he does take them, he will continue his numbed, self-destructive existence, but he thinks otherwise and pops them back in the bottle. Finally, elsewhere, another lone figure smokes quietly in his office as a man in a suit rushes in to tell him news. "They want you now! Asset Prime is moving!" That could only mean Mark Spector. The mysterious smoking man scans the man in the suit, and immediately a flood of information is gathered from telltale signs. Cheap shoes, bad breath, and glint in the eye are all he need. And a mere glance, the smoking man is able to sum up all the faults and traits of the man in the suit, and by doing so, foresee his actions. The smoking man is the profile, and he's eager to profile Mark Spector. And there you have it. And remember, stay valiant, wrong show. Stay true to Khonshu, my friends.
Thank you very much, Sean, from Only the Valiant. Almost forgot where he was there for a second, but no. Sincerely, many thanks, Sean, for a great narration, and we'll put all in our show notes. We'll put where you can find Sean's podcast of Only the Valiant. They have a Twitter account as well as a website and a Facebook group. And I'll give a shout out for that in our Spector-CALL section of this podcast. Now, getting to, let me just crack open, I've got here a trade of Charlie Houston's. I'll open it up in front of me, and let's get into this review of issue 2. Overall impressions from this. I thought this was a very solid issue from Charlie Houston and David Finch. It was a nice follow-up to issue 1, which we read last week. And it did the right things, in the fact that we got a lot more of an explanation of, how Mark got to where he is now. And it actually reveals a lot of things here. So, I really enjoyed it. I thought, it was quite gruesome. I question whether it should have been part of Marvel Knights or Max, because, there's a lot of, it's quite graphic. The art, I think, is superb. It suits the stories perfectly. It's grim and dark. Very similar vibe to the first issue. We get a little bit, just a tease then again from Charlie Houston, to keep this story going along with the introduction of a couple of other characters. But no, highly enjoyable, this one. Similar to the first issue, not too heavy on text, so you could really easily burn through this again quite quickly. And it's what I've done with a lot of with this Houston run. Actually, I've reread it a few times. It's very easy to read, and it's very nice to look at. So if we go into our 4 main aspects, let me just bring that up now. Yeah, our 4 main aspects here. The first one, I thought the main one is an explanation of Mark's, and you see it from the beginning as well. A lot of the main aspects are towards the beginning of this issue. Is the explanation of Mark's legs and how he got to where he is now at the bottom. How he's kind of a bit of a wreck. And we get a quite a graphic retelling of his encounter with the Bushman, who is one of his main arch nemesis, and they have an absolutely brutal fight. And this explains the lead up to Mark, to Moon Knight, becoming crippled. And so what happens is that we're kind of dropped into beautifully drawn, beautifully dark, panels by David Finch. And we see a battle that occurs in the rooftops between Moon Knight and Bushman. We don't know, the context of this. We don't know what happened beforehand. All we know is that these two massive titans are fighting against each other, and they are fighting what it looks like to the death. So there's a lot of blood here. There's a lot of carnage here as Moon Knight and Bushman go toe to toe, and it's very much an even battle. You have Moon Knight standing over Bushman in one of the iconic images of him, of Moon Knight. But then you have Bushman not giving up, and he's got bloodied, sharpened teeth. Moon Knight's got a bloodied truncheon. They're still kicking and punching each other. Bushman flings Moon Knight against a chimney stack, and it's the force is so great that it kind of cracks the chimney stack. There's more blood everywhere. Moon Knight's got blurred vision. He throws his truncheon, all at the same time. It's kind of, Moon Knight's narrating it, saying, "Look, I was too complacent. I got a bit sloppy with Bushman because we've fought so many times before." And it just continues with the violence. Bushman comes in with a knife and he slashes Moon Knight across the chest. He then does, as all evil villains do, he licks his bloodied blade. And Moon Knight doesn't give up. He fights again. There's more slashing with knives. Moon Knight grabs Bushman's neck. Bushman does the same to Moon Knight. They're really struggling. Like, these guys are really evenly matched. And again, just a crazed look on Bushman's face, and the artwork by David Finch is fantastic. Moon Knight's bleeding out. It's a real battle. And then we see one of the pivotal moments of this issue, and one of the main aspects I was mentioning. Bushman manages to push Moon Knight across the edge of the roof, and then he just pushes him off. And Moon Knight, I guess his cape is tattered. He's already a little injured and ragged, and he hits. It's quite heavy. He hits his back of his head against the balustrade of the fire escapes. As he descends, his legs get caught and they hit the fire escapes as well. He tries to right himself and he lands, but as Finch draws it so well, he lands really awkwardly, and his legs just kind of snap underneath him. So we see how Mark ends up in the wheelchair, and why he is kind of out of action. And it was this brutal fight with Bushman. So as he's lying pretty much, and again, you see it's quite sickening here. You see his knees mangled beyond repair. He's just lying down there, and Bushman comes down to try and finish him off. And this will lead up into one of my other main aspects, which is a massive point in Moon Knight history, and I guess, and with his rivalry with Bushman. We see, as we continue this, as Bushman tries to get to him to finish him off, Moon Knight just chucks all these crescent darts at him just constantly. And we just see more blood and Bushman slowly wobbling, a little, not as sure as he is before. And again, the graphicness of it, we see Bushman, with a few crescent darts on his shoulders, impaled in through his throat. He's bleeding out as well, and he collapses right next to Moon Knight. They're still going at it, these guys. And my second aspect is coming, Looney. You probably know what it is, but I'm building up to it again. Bushman's still fighting, and he comes in, and he crawls over to Moon Knight, and he sinks his sharp teeth into Moon Knight's face, and rips off part of his mask, and I'm assuming part of Moon Knight's face, because there's blood everywhere. Moon Knight is, not down for the count yet. He punches back on Bushman, and this is one of the biggest points in Moon Knight history, and one of the main aspects for this issue. We see Moon Knight then take out a crescent dart, and in graphic fashion, we see Moon Knight carve the face of Bushman, basically skin his face alive, and rip it off and hold it up to the moon. And he shouts out Khonshu as well. So he would have done this while Bushman was alive, I take it, because if you look at the previous panels, Bushman's looking up at him, kind of snarling at him, but Mark does this absolutely insane thing and cuts the face off Bushman. We then see Bushman just lying there. He is a gory mess. You would assume that he's dead, because, it'd be pretty hard to live through that, I think. And Moon Knight's obviously got his broken knees and legs there. So, two big aspects there, Loonies, for this issue. We see the origin of how Moon Knight is, or why Mark is as he is now in this Volume 5 issue, and we see the totally horrific, I guess, display of Moon Knight's insanity as well, and the lengths that these two will go to get the better of one another. So Moon Knight definitely comes out, I guess, on top with that one. The third aspect, and I've touched upon it, is basically the gore of this issue. I thought, I really thought this should have been like a Marvel Knights or a Max issue for sure, because having read a lot of the Punisher Max series and some of the other Max series, well, the Punisher Max series is quite graphic as well. But this is up there, although it's just this one act, or this fight scene, it kind of tamed itself a little towards the end of the issue. It kind of stops with the violence, but the confronting graphic gore and violence of this issue was one of the big takeaways of this issue, and I think it goes a long way to making this whole run by Houston quite memorable. He's introduced this thing into Moon Knight history, and it's still going now. It's become one of the most important things in Moon Knight's history, and it actually informed a lot of the subsequent series of Moon Knight. So if you look at Vengeance of the Moon Knight, you look at Bendis's run, you look at the Ellis run, all of them where Mark is kind of haunted by Khonshu. It all kind of revolves around this. Like with Vengeance of the Moon Knight, you have basically Khonshu depicted. You have Khonshu depicted as Khonshu on the shoulder of Mark, but in the later run, of Benson after this as well, you have a dead Bushman. You have Khonshu depicted as a dead Bushman, and obviously this instance here has haunted Moon Knight and has deeply scarred him. So one of the big things that Houston has brought to Moon Knight is this event. Finally, as well, I thought one of the other main aspects here was actually towards the end, and again, the end, nice reveals of stuff, and at the end here we do get the introduction of the Profile. He turned out to be quite an interesting character, I thought, in Moon Knight, and he was used, across. It was used across many arcs as well. I've just finished rereading Shadowland Moon Knight. He's used there again. He approaches the Dark Daredevil, try to offer his services to him, and we get a first glimpse of the Profile here. And I like the way that his power set is encapsulated. The Profile is a very unassuming character, but he is indeed, I think, a mutant. And what he can do, he can literally do what his namesake says. He can profile anyone. So he can read anyone, and it's almost like a precognitive thing, because he can predetermine what people will do because he knows them kind of so well. And this last page, or last couple of pages, so you see him baked in red colouring here, and you see a gentleman come in asking him that, well, telling him that they want to see the Profile now. We see the Profile profiling this guy, and I like the way it's illustrated. It has a lot of just text and arrows and circles, just basically highlighting a lot of points about this person. So you see that what the Profile sees is that this guy will die young and unloved. He date raped his first lover. He hates his mother and hates a brother. I'm just trying to read the words here. He's got bad breath. Overgroomed, so he's vain. Underwear's too tight. Says he pee shy. Cheap shoes. And I think later on he mentions that he's a bedwetter and all that. So he kind of sums the person up just by looking at them. And I think this is, although we don't see much of him in this issue, just the significance of this character later on in the Moon Knight arcs is enough, I think, to warrant it being a main aspect of this issue. So pretty cool there. Yeah, and the art's pretty cool as well. So those are the four main aspects, and I can't not mention Crawley. So I've got actually Crawley in here in my notes, a couple of notes here. So as it said in the synopsis, Crawley comes in, and you see that he supplies Mark with his painkillers, and Mark's obviously at a very low ebb of his life, and he just relies a lot on these drugs to kind of, I guess, take the pain away. But what we also have from Crawley as well is that what he mentions in his very verbose way is that Frenchie, basically his Gallic friend, says hello, and Crawley says that he is in a spot of trouble, and he is speaking for Frenchie that he needs help from Mark. So this is a little bit of an impetus for Mark to hold off on the painkillers. It gives him a bit of time to, I guess, to absorb, his life as it is going, and maybe he should hold off on the painkillers and go out and see Frenchie. So not much is revealed in this issue yet, but we'll get to the later issues of this run. There's a slightly complicated relationship now with Frenchie and Mark, slightly strained as well, but we'll get to that. And we'll get to also the significance of Crawley mentioning to Mark that Frenchie has called for his help. So we'll get to that soon. But yeah, I thought I couldn't not mention Crawley in this issue. It was always good to see him again. It's good to see him with his tea bag. I love Crawley's tea bag and how he just he uses it, I don't know how many hundreds of times, and how he's always got flies around him. The other little note I'm going to show as well is that there's a little bit of the supernatural here. You have Crawley looking up at the statue of Khonshu, and then when Crawley looks away, you see for a second the eyes of Khonshu light up, and then when Crawley looks at the statue again, it disappears. So the presence of Khonshu is very much there, very subtly done by Charlie Huston, but I like the use of the statue and just that kind of ambiguity as to whether or not, is Mark just seeing that, or Crawley certainly doesn't see that, but we see that as well. So very, very cool stuff. Let me see if there are any other notes here. No, other than, again, as I mentioned before, the text is pretty sparse here, so the pictures do a lot of the storytelling, which is not to say that, Charlie Huston is not, holding up his end of the bargain. I'm sure he's laying out a lot of this, and he's describing a lot of this to David Finch. But yeah, it's a very accessible issue, and I like the introduction of both the profile and of Crawley as well. Just another little thing to drop. So the profile seems to be working for a faction. We'll reveal that soon, but all I can say, and for those that have read it, probably know it anyway, there is a particular group, I guess, that is reintroduced, that Huston reintroduces, which is very much part of Moon Knight history. So it's good to see that Huston's tapping into the lore of Moon Knight, so that's pretty cool. As for Crescent Dart ratings for this, I guess I'll have to give it something. Look, I really enjoyed this again. I think I gave the first issue 4 stars. I'll have to give this 4.5. I'll have to give it a bit more. I really do enjoy it. Whereas the first one was a setup, it kind of, and usually first issues it sets up, for those that don't know Moon Knight, it kind of gives you a roundabout impression, and a summary of who he is. That was pretty much a setup. This one, in the violence and revealing, I guess, both Bushman and Moon Knight's, I guess, terrible injuries, it really did open up the floor to I guess, the Moon Knight history of this. And it's hard not to ignore, not ignore the graphic nature of this, and it just sets the tone of this whole series. It kind of reaffirms the tone of it from issue 1. I really did enjoy it. I enjoyed seeing Crawley back as well, because we saw Marlene and Frenchie introduced in issue 1, which is great to see them. So it's great to see all the players here. We still haven't seen Gina or Ricky and Ray, but it was great to see Crawley, Samuels, obviously, and it was good to see the profile as well, introduction of a significant character. So yeah, I'd have to give it 4.5. I really did enjoy it. And Loonies, you should highly recommend this, you guys, to pick it up. As mentioned, similar to issue 1, it's readily available, I guess, across the board. You can get it from Comixology. It's out on trade, softcover and hardcover, single issues. You can still find them on eBay and I'm sure, possibly, your comic book store. Marvel Unlimited, which is where I think Sean from Only the Valiant has been reading this run, and I'm hoping, Sean, that you read all of it because it is a ripping read. And I think that's it. So available across a lot of platforms there. Highly recommend it. 4.5. Love it, love it, love it. Well, Loonies, I think that will pretty much wrap up this episode, just the first solo episode. I guess it's been very, very strange, speaking, just here by myself, but it was a great read, both these classic and modern runs. I hope it does kind of, pique your interest to pick them up or hunt them down. And we have plenty more coming up anyway. So with next phase, as mentioned, hopefully we'll have Chris Jones from Defenders TV podcast. He'll be joining us. We'll be talking to him. Love to pick his brain about podcasting as well as Defenders TV podcast. I'm a massive fan of theirs, so and a massive fan of, of Derek, John, and Chris just as podcasters. So, totally stoked to have Chris, on board. And as mentioned, Chris is a Spider-Man fan. So, we'll be doing a double classic run, next phase as well. So, we'll be doing Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, Volume 1, Issue 22, which is called By the Light of the Silvery Moon Knight. And Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, Volume 1, Issue 23, Guess Who's Buried in Grant's Tomb. We'll also have Chris do the guest narration. May well do a live narration for us, which will be pretty cool. Looking forward to, again, just reviewing these 2 issues with him. Very, again, classic Bronze Age, I think, issues. But also, at the same time, very classic Spidey as well. I really enjoyed reading these and can't wait to unpack it with Chris and Connor. Spector-CALL, again, these are our shout-outs, and again, I would love to shout out Sean. I'm not sure how to pronounce the surname, Sean Neprid, he's a guest narrator from Only the Valiant, Valiant Comics Radio. Their website is onlythevaliant.com. They have a Facebook group. You should get on it if you're interested in Valiant or just good comic books in general. They're on www.facebook.com/groups/onlythevaliant. And they're also on Twitter. Their handle is @onlythevaliant, so very easy to remember there. Thanks once again, Sean. It was so cool to finally have you on board as well. I do hope you enjoy your further readings of Moon Knight. And if you need any more recommendations, please just hit us up or drop us a line in the group or on Twitter or anywhere across that we're currently residing in. So thank you again, Sean. Thank you. Okay, well, Loonies, I'm about to sign off here. So, as per usual, I'd just like to let you know where you can find us. So, as per usual, you can find us on email at moonknightpodcast@gmail.com. We also have a website, intothenightpodcast.wordpress.com. And we also are on Facebook. So facebook.com/ITKMoonKnight. Our Facebook group is facebook.com/groups/intothennight. We're also on Twitter with @ITKMoonKnight. And, we're also on Instagram, Tumblr, and YouTube. So just search for Into the Night. That's with a K, a Moon Knight podcast. Also as well, quickly, I'd just like to mention, we are part of something called The Collective, which is still in its infancy, but it is a podcast network, an informal network of like-minded podcasts. So, as mentioned previously, we are with the likes of Inner Demons, Ghost Rider podcast, Sons of the Dragon, Immortal Iron Fist podcast, Adelan Rising, which is an Inhumans podcast, Namor podcast, which is about the Submariner. We have the Fantastic Cast as well, which does a cool job on the Fantastic Four, which basically does a classic run throughout history of all the Fantastic Four appearances, as well as not just character-based podcasts, but also the likes of Defenders TV podcast. We have a Hulk podcast, Uncanny Nerdverse podcast, which is an X-Men podcast, I should say, and I Am Your Target Demographic, Capes and Lunatics. There's a few there. I hope I haven't missed anyone there, but I will put on a link in our show notes where you can access all their websites and their Twitter handles and I guess paths to their podcasts themselves. So definitely check them out. We're trying to build it, and it's great to have support from podcasts, so we can kind of prop each other up, which is fantastic. Also as well, just around the corner, my gosh, it begins very shortly. We are doing a podcast crossover, the podcast crossover event of 2018. We're teaming up with Defenders TV podcast, Sons of the Dragon, the Iron Fist podcast, and Inner Demons, and we're covering all of the Damnation event on Marvel. So that is the Doctor Strange Damnation event, which will feature all of our character-driven namesakes and more. So, as mentioned, I think Defenders TV podcast will be covering Doctor Strange. Ghost Rider will be doing Ghost Rider. Iron Fist. We've picked up the tab to do Scarlet Spider, so not exactly Moon Knight, but I'm sure Moon Knight will be there somewhere. And we'll all be doing the core books as well. We'll be doing an issue each, so cannot wait for that. I believe the first crossover episode will be featured on Sons of the Dragon, an Immortal Iron Fist podcast, so please keep your eyes out for that. And I strongly urge any of you loonies out there, or listeners, to try and catch all 4 podcasts to get the entire coverage of the Damnation event. It should be fun. I am super excited about this. I just can't wait to get cracking. I think the first issue comes out 21st of February, so shortly after that you'll get on Sons of the Dragon the first review, which will be Damnation issue 1. So anyway, loonies, thank you so much for hanging around for my ramble. It was a bit of a slow start, but like a diesel, I kind of got there, hopefully. If you can just wade through the babble at the beginning, hopefully it all made sense. I'll hope to see you across any of our social platforms, and looking forward to hearing from you. Please, if you can, just drop us a line, tell us how we're going, or let us know what you think about the issues we're reviewing. It'll be great to hear from you, and we're more than happy to read them out. And I guess that's me signing us off. So may Khonshu watch over the denizens of the night. Catch you later.
Moon Knight and affiliated characters, stories and events are properties of Marvel Characters Incorporated. Materials used and discussed within the podcast are intended for critique and review purposes only under the fair dealing concept of the current Copyright Act. The views, information or opinions expressed during the podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of the copyright owners.